I want to welcome you all to today's online discussion of our web series, Business Success Skills. And today we speak about how to spend wisely. We host this Business Success Skill every 2 weeks, but we also record it. And why that is relevant is because you might want to tune in again, or you want to listen to the ones that we've already done. I think it's 10 or 12 so far. The easiest way to access them is to go on YouTube and to basically search for Business Success Skills and Schumacher. You can also go through my Instagram account, Benni_Frowein, where you have a link and it brings you right there. But we also host several webinars of different formats, and I want to speak about them real quick today. So this coming Tuesday, we will host a webinar where 5 Black female designers will discuss how we can become more inclusive and diverse in our industry. And next Thursday, Derek Caponegro, our creative director, will host a webinar that is dedicated to style. So you will all get the invitation, and all you will have to do is to just register if you're interested into it. And then this Business Success Skill webinar again repeats on Thursday in 2 weeks. But coming back to today, with me, I have 3 exceptional people, creative minds and business powerhouses. And and I wanted to introduce you guys. So I'm trying to share my screen, which normally should go smoothly. So give me feedback. Do you see it? Okay, perfect. So let me start with Dan. Dan is the owner of BHDM Design, a New York-based interior design company, mastering both residential and commercial projects. It's a truly international company with projects around the world. And Dan's teams has had many features in hospitality and residential design magazines. Dan, thank you very much for joining. And I chose this as a last picture because I think it bursts of color and joy, and we need that these days.
We need that right now, right? Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Maggie Griffin is the principal of Maggie Griffin Design. Maggie is a powerhouse and based in Gainesville, Georgia. She and her teams covers everything from helping clients with styling, but also from ground up new build projects. Maggie is the 2nd time the panelist today. So Maggie, thank you very much for joining again. And for being here.
Thank you so much.
And Mark Sikes. Mark is truly a multi-talent. Mark, you are an interior designer, you're a book author, and you also design rugs, fabrics, lighting, tabletops, and I'm sure I have forgotten a lot of other things. Mark has also 2 fabulous lines with Schumacher. I obviously had to mention that. Mark, thank you very much for joining today and enriching also the panel.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So before, so I am, by the way, also to introduce myself, I'm Benni Frowein. I'm Schumacher's president, and I'm hosting this webinar series. Before we start, let me today 2 quick logistical things. So number 1 is I think we have prepared questions about this topic today, and I think we're going to do like a 30-40 minute question talk, and then the last 20 to 30 minutes we will do a Q&A. So please feel free to hover with your mouse on your Zoom screen, and you will see a Q&A button. So if you click on that and you enter your question, try to make it short because I have to speak, think, and read at the same time. Try to make it short, and we will then go question by question through it in the last half an hour. So let's get started. I always start with a personal question. Dan, we start with you. So easing into the topic of how to spend wisely, how much of a creative person are you? How much of a business person are you, given that you've been very successful with your own company?
Thanks. I think the answer is I'm the most dangerous kind. I'm a creative person trying to be a business person. So I think it's funny. I think I started out primarily as creative, and the more employees that we've gained and the more, gratefully, the number of clients that have increased, I think I'm more and more a business person. The good news is I find both fun. It's really both about creativity and creative problem solving. So I would say I'm probably 70% business now.
Good that you are here today so we can speak about all the financials. Maggie, how would you describe yourself? More creative, more business?
I think that I was born a creative, so I don't ever remember not being creative my whole life, but I've had to train myself to be business oriented. And I've had to educate myself, and I've had to work a lot off of instinct when it comes to that. It doesn't come as easily as the creative side does. So I'm a dreamer, and I can come up with, ideas and concepts and proposals, but when it comes to the business side, it actually is just very hard for me to switch those gears sometimes, because it's definitely using two different parts of myself or two different sides of my brain. But I've relied on a ton of advice and a ton of education and encouragement to train myself to have more of a business sense about where we are going, from here forward.
Thank you, Maggie. I think a lot of people that are watching this will relate with you too. So, Mark, what about you? You're so diverse in what you does and so on. Does this all come from creativity? Are you also 50-50? Like, who are you as a person?
Well, I think naturally I'm a creative person. I think that anyone who's an interior decorator, I think we all know that, the creativity is the initial part, but there's 80% of the process is operational and executing the creativity. Within that, there's obviously managing a team. There's, following up with vendors. There's this constant cycle around processes and systems to ensure that you can execute. So I have a retail background before I became a decorator. So I was very systematic and process oriented, which I think has been a very big benefit to our firm and the success of our firm. But I would have to say, I think it's I think people think we're more creative than we really are. So I would probably say, 20% creative, 80% operational. I'm hoping, with my team that, I'm being able to remove myself a little bit from the day-to-day tasks and be more creative and lead, like in that. That's kind of the goal, but that's pretty much our overview of us.
Okay, so I think we're gonna have a really good conversation because I think, like most people that are joining are like fall into one of your guys' group. When I was preparing the questions, I felt, that when you think about how to spend wisely, it probably starts somehow with transparency on your own numbers. And I would also, assume that when you start your company, that's probably the hardest thing to do. So I wanted to ask you, and then maybe we start with you again, like how do you organize yourself and your business to achieve that transparency? Maybe also when you were a smaller company, how do you do it today?
Yeah,
I think that would be very interesting.
I would imagine for a lot of people watching, I have been in all of your shoes or am in your shoes still. We were, my former business partner, Brian Humphrey, and I started just two guys in a room. We were back and forth to each other's apartments. And when you are basically dealing with personal finances, because you don't have an office, you don't have staff, you don't have any of those things, it's a much easier transparency to like, the money we make is the money that we earn, and that's really the bottom line there. Transparency really is, I think, equates to accountability, Benny, when you get to growing and you have staff and you feel that that responsibility to other people. And so for us, it really has been, I answered earlier, I'm a creative trying to be a business person. And so I think to compensate for the things that I don't know in business, I've actually surrounded myself with people who do our bookkeeping and do our taxes and report to me on a monthly and quarterly basis on like, here's where you are, here's where you need to go to make your year. And so transparency is about accountability and making sure, for me at least, that I've built in the measures along the way that I have people that help me do that too.
Mm-hmm. Mark, how do you create this transparency? So then you say it's about accountability and finding people that do it for you. How do you get this transparency?
Well, we work on really regimented calendars and really regimented calendar. And we look at the year and all the clients and determine what phase they're in and kind of estimate when we'll be doing proposals and when we'll be installing. So we kind of have this great system of kind of knowing what the flow of money is and where it's coming. And then also from a calendar perspective, not overlapping, multiple installs in 1 month. But so we're very structured when it comes to that. And then we have an operations team and a calendar team that we meet on a pretty regular basis to review those and update them, because it's always shifting and changing. As you guys know, you might think you're getting all your proposals out in a certain month, but they might move over into another month. So we try to stay on top of that, because it really does help with, also like managing the bookkeeping side. So lots of calendars and lots of updates and touch bases on them.
Maggie, how do you organize yourself and your team with regards to transparency on numbers?
I totally agree with Mark and Dan. I've always used like an online banking system to track where we're spending. And that system has had to grow with our business. So maybe when it was just myself and an intern, it was much easier to keep track of myself. So then once I knew we were at the point to where I had to bring someone in, my bookkeeper keeps track of all of it. We have regular chats with our CPA to make sure that we are doing the right things, that things are as streamlined and as transparent as possible, that we know where it's all going, kind of what the big chunks are being allotted to. And, just she and I check in with each other multiple times a week, just saying, okay, where are we? What do I need to do? What do you need to do? QuickBooks has just been so wonderful for us because it makes April very easy. So if we kind of do the hard parts and the minutia up front, it saves us some headache in the end. And we've always tried to kind of do it that way, even as the business has grown. Just kind of once you get the hang of it, and then here comes, another wave. So, and we are certainly calendar driven too. And I'll save that too for another question.
Yeah, no, I think, Mark, you also alluded to it. I think what's important is that, for example, QuickBooks and so on, this is really to keep all your numbers together and you put them into the system so that you understand like where you stand and where you can spend and where what your profitability is and so on. But Mark, then you alluded also to the fact that those calendars help you to forecast your sales. Maybe you can elaborate a little more on that, like forecasting sales expenses. Like if you make this super specific, what do you really do, and what calendar tool do you use for that? And why do you feel it's so important?
Well, we have our daily, obviously calendar that we use through Gmail, which has all of our meetings, but we basically have an Excel document that really is based around client name and months. And we work in 5 phases. The first phase of our work is architectural phase, and then we have a creative phase, proposal, execution, and installation phase. So we identify each month where, with those words, what client is where. So there'll be months when we, only bring in like $20,000 of proposals, and there's months when we bring in like $2 million. It doesn't matter. So we want to be aware of that, so we know, as we know what our monthly expenses are, how all that kind of gauges. So, we're not, that we're just kind of staying on track. So we really like always thinking 6 months ahead. And most of the calendars are pretty much made in-house, like spreadsheets.
Dan, do you guys also do that in Excel? Do you think that's important? Do you forecast at all? Like how do you organize all of that?
Yeah, we do forecast. And I think it actually goes back to your question about, how much transparency do we give our team to? I forecast based on the prior year, and I look specifically at 2 big buckets. I look at salaries and I look at rent. We've just taken on a beautiful new office space, which we miss because nobody's sitting there right now. So I'm sure like some people on this call, I'm like remembering the office that I'm paying for, we're not working in right now. But when I think one of the ways that we forecast is to look at the prior trend for the year before, and then to really kind of say, okay, we did X in business last year, and this year, for us to make our year, we need to make this number. I share that number with my senior team because I think we all share sort of the motivation and the the reward from making sure that, when clients come in, we're servicing those projects efficiently, and that everybody knows that it takes a lot to keep this business sort of running and robust. So I think, to answer your prior question now too, transparency for me with the team is about sort of motivating the team, sort of one team, one dream as well. But to forecast, we look from year to year. We do trend up and down, but I think we also I do one thing a little bit different, Benny. Our team works primarily in fees plus markup. And so I base my year on the fees, and I mostly use markup as sort of like the additional revenue at the end of the year that like goes to bonuses, goes to sort of building the business infrastructure. So this is when I can say I'm a creative trying to be a business person. I'm better sort of like blank slate, January 1, saying like we have zero money and we got to make this much for the year, and primarily counting fees for that.
Let me ask you one follow-up question, because I think it's very, very interesting, Maggie, before I come to you. So imagine you are not up above last year, you're not like, you're far away from your goal or something like that. Are you then discussing with your team how to do outreach and where you could go to like find more projects, or like, how do you do that?
Great question. I mean, interestingly, our returning clientele is based on the success of my team and the efforts of my team. I give them all the credit for that. I would say I am really the one to generate a lot of the newer business, and so I hold a lot of that responsibility. But if the year is trending down, I'm also, I think, fiscally conservative when it comes to my business, in that we will hold a nest egg from year to year for that rainy day fund. And so even if the year doesn't make what the prior year made, we're able to retain the talent and the office space and kind of all the things that keep our business consistent, because I think that consistency is important for both our team dynamic and the deliverables that we make to the clients.
Mm-hmm. Maggie, do you forecast? If you do, like, why do you think that's important? And also, how do you really do it? Do you also use spreadsheets? Do you do it more like Dan? I would love to hear that.
I am huge on a calendar. I love just being able to see what we have coming up, using different kinds of calendars. We have a shared Google Calendar that is between myself, my assistant, my workroom, and my other two designers, so that we aren't overloading our workroom, and we can pace our projects at a good pace. We also have a dry erase calendar that we keep up, and it's big and it's in the office, and it's very quick for us to see kind of how the month is going to go. Then I, of course,
you just add a 0 to the end. You had a better month then, right?
Yeah. And then I have a paper calendar that is more for me as a working mom, that I can kind of determine my pace. And that has come with a lot of trial and error. That has come from, many years of knowing where I overworked myself, and I was to know what works best for myself at this point. Where I am now is a little different than what I was wanting and able to do at 25, fast forward 10 years. And I think that's for everyone to figure out themselves. As far as if a project we thought was about to go forward, and they maybe press pause for a little bit, we just kind of up the timelines on the next projects. So, there's very few clients that would be sad to hear their installs are happening earlier than they thought. So, if that is what we can do for them, then they're very excited. We do give our clients a nice frame of time too, as far as installations go. So from point of, pulling the trigger to install, we give a window of time there too. And it really just depends on if it's, especially a construction project, there's so much that is out of our control. So if we get to move that timeline up a little bit, everyone's happy. But we also have prepared them to say, if that timeline has to be pushed back, then they're not blindsided. But in the meantime, we're filling in the gaps with the other things. Maybe there's a client who didn't need a full, a whole first floor reno and redo. Maybe she just was ready to kind of fluff up her drapes or her master bedroom. So we can kind of fill in with those gaps. So I'm big on the calendar, because I think that you can learn your pace, and not overwork yourself and overwork your resources.
And I also love the idea, Maggie, and it's not so, how to spend wisely oriented, but, of including like a shared calendar with your workroom, or like, with like the vendors or whoever you really work with a lot, because you have full transparency. I got the question from Lisa Carver, and I just like throw it in because it fits so nicely. She says she would love to hear what type of accounting software everyone uses. And does anyone have both a retail side of the business as well as the design firm? Because obviously those businesses go differently. Maggie, I think you said you have QuickBooks.
Yes, QuickBooks, online business.
Yeah. Dan, what do
We
you
run
guys
everything.
use?
Yeah, we run everything through Design Manager, and that includes sort of accounting for all of our payroll expenses too. So everything is kind of a snapshot, whether it's client purchases, markup, fees, cash in, cash out, all go through Design Manager.
And Mark, you have a very diverse business with a lot of different things, like different business models. Which accounting software do you use?
We use Studio Webware for most everything, but then we have multiple accounts because since we do a lot of partnerships, all that kind of money goes into different accounts. So like there's an operating account, and then there's there's 3 different accounts. So, but we use Studio Webware pretty much for everything.
Thank you. And thank you, Lisa, for the question. So let's get a little more specific. So if we go through a designer's profit and loss account, we see a lot of dominant cost drivers. And Dan, you already said, you look at staff and you look at your rent. So let's start, let's tackle, all of the designer's costs, like step by step, one by one. So Dan, let's get back to this office topic. I mean, you live in New York, you work in New York, so it's probably also a little different there, but what do you say, like buy or rent? If you're renting, do you think one should renegotiate the rents now? Like what is your advice there for everyone?
Yeah, I loved that you sent me these questions before, because I was forced to think about them and be like, what should I be doing that I'm not doing? We do rent in New York. Let me start with where we started. So we were 2 guys out of sort of our apartments, and the benefit there is, like, if you have a live workspace, part of that is a tax write-off to a certain percentage. So for smaller companies, working out of your living space has its benefits. The detriment is you have Schumacher samples all over your house. So, you have to live with that too. They're beautiful, but they're everywhere, We actually started by subleasing space. That was our first office space, which for us was a great option because it's really very little commitment, right? It was sort of a 1-page contract with somebody who already signed the lease. And so when we started our business, for the first 2 years, we were subleasing from someone else. And that was great because it gave us so much flexibility, especially in a time of the business when things were uncertain. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't even have Design Manager yet. I'm sure it was me with like a checkbook and a pen kind of making things happen. But that was the first 2 years. When we signed a lease, for us, it was about renting space in New York. I think for the same reason, purchasing would be a dream come true. But I think that the biggest issue for us as a company at that time was you need a big chunk of down payment in order to do that, specifically in New York. So we've always rented. And I would say one of the tips in renting for us is something called tenant improvement, TI dollars. So when you were doing your lease with your landlord, they can offer you something called tenant improvement dollars, which for us just about built out our space. We put money toward it, but we now are in almost 5,000 square feet in New York. Benny, you've been to our office, our newest office anyway. And
beautiful.
It's a great place to work, but we were smart about our spend and baking some of that spend to build out the space into the lease for the project too. So yes, it's a big expense. We rent our space, but we try to make that rent work for us as well.
Super insightful. Thank you, Dan. Mark, you're based in LA, so totally different beast. How do you do that? What would you suggest people should do starting out, smaller businesses, larger businesses?
Well, I like Dan started when I first started. We were working out of my garage in our garden. But over the years, obviously the team has gotten bigger. So we rent. We're on La Cienega, I think LA is an interesting place because, you know, real estate and kind of movement changes. Like, so, you know, La Cienega is Hot Street sometime, and then it's Robertson. So the design community kind of shifts. And I also want the flexibility to be able to grow. So if we would want to downsize or we want to have a larger space, depending on what we're doing, I think when you start buying, you're kind of stuck with a certain space. So, you know, we've always rented, and we immediately, obviously, when all this happened with the pandemic, we did renegotiate our rental fees and try to be as smart as possible during this time. That gives you the ability to do that too. I guess if you own, you could also refinance, but yeah, so we rent, and probably will always rent.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, did your landlord renegotiate with you?
Yes.
I'm gonna want that number. I think that sounds good.
Well, I mean, you know, it's a period of time that was, you know, it wasn't indefinitely, it was just for a period of time. So yeah, they were very flexible.
That's great.
Thank you, Mark. Maggie, did you, I mean, you live, you know, Atlanta, or you work also, you know, Metro Atlanta. It's a little different probably than, you know, like downtown LA, downtown New York. What did you do, and what would you suggest, or, you know, give as a piece of advice?
You know, when I first started, I was also working out of my house, and which was really wonderful when I had my 2 children to be able to work from home. It was more manageable when I just had my oldest, and then once I had my second, it was very evident that there were too many fabric samples laying around. I've got 2 boys, and so my husband, who is in real estate too, also saw that that was a need that we needed to fulfill for my business, and so we found the most adorable little cottage here in Gainesville that is in our historic district. Had been a residential property since it was built in 1920. It's a little Sears and Roebuck cottage, about less than 1,500 square feet, but is very close to my house. It had the look and the feel of, you know, home. So it's a very welcome place for us to have our clients. We had to undergo a 9-month renovation, which, you know, was also one of those things we had to prepare for. But in the end, purchasing this office building for myself was one of the best things that we ever did. So I share this space with 8 other women. So it's a fun place to kind of come and go. It feels very, you know, designing women. That was also based out of Atlanta. So that was a good decision for us, but we have real estate inventory that is very different than New York and LA. So it was easy to find for myself. And, you know, some of my colleagues and friends who are designers in Atlanta have the luxury of kind of a similar real estate market as here in Gainesville, much bigger, of course. But there's also much more commercial choices in a large city. Maybe if you're just starting out, you only need a small little suite. And as your business grows, you know, the space that you need can grow. So I definitely think it depends on sort of what your expertise is, how much space you actually need, because sometimes you really just don't need the space you think you do. But for us here at MGD, we needed it. It was time.
And also, I mean, you also used it, you know, from what I understood and saw, as your calling card, right, for your business.
Yeah.
And you wanted to invest that money in something that would be your own. Let's move one step down at the profit and loss account, and let's move to the team. I would find super interesting to understand from you guys, like, for which functions do you hire like a full-time member? When do you hire on an hourly basis? And then, again, I'm sure it depends on the size and, you know, and so on of your businesses. But Maggie, maybe we just start with you right away again. Where did you spend in full-time employees? Where did you spend on, you know, hourly basis? How have you been like approaching that?
So we are actually all on hourly here. We're all kind of, well, I'm part-time. So we have, you know, a lot of people sort of in and out. I have found that being on an hourly with the women here in our office helps me keep track of our efficiency very well kind of where we're spending our time. That's not to say that it will always be that way, but that's the way we're doing this right now. And it has seemed to be, it works for everyone. But I know that, contract employees, there's a lot of different ways to structure that. So for us right now, we are an hourly business.
Interesting. Mark, how do you guys do that?
Well, we're the opposite. Pretty much everyone in our office is full time. We do have some hourly employees that are more in the bookkeeping / finance world, but all the project managers and all the design teams are full time because we travel so much. And, I think for us, I feel, it's easier to have a really functioning, structured team when everyone has their roles and responsibilities. And I think that's sometimes a little harder to do when you have people just in and out of the office at shorter periods of time. So for us, as of now, most people are full-time, full benefits at different levels, but that's how we're structured.
Interesting. Then how do you do that in New York?
Yeah, we are also almost exclusively full-time salaried office. There are a few exceptions, our amazing bookkeeper, whose last name is Divine. That's how good she is. She is one of our hourly team members. And we have some people who started in New York and have migrated to the West Coast or to Florida. And so when people leave the state, we've asked them to be hourly employees instead, or to sort of set up their own entities. And so, for us, it's been an interesting, like anybody who sits in our office is full-time and salaried and benefits and everything. One exception there is, I think, I mentioned earlier, like salaries are for us sort of one of our biggest line items, if not the biggest line item of our company. And so we are selective with who we bring into the fold and the family and the sort of network and we put in front of clients. And so we usually start people out with sort of a 90-day sort of test round at an hourly before we bring them on to a salary. And that's for everybody's benefit. You could think I'm as crazy as I am and be like, this is not the right place for me, or, this could be a great fit for everyone. So we like to build in that sort of window at the beginning of a working experience together too.
Very interesting, because I think what I just learned from the three of you is that, hourly basis, helps you when you hire someone to gain trust and, for both sides and to see whether this is really a relationship that is going to work. And Maggie, in your case, where you just allow, the 8 designers and female designers also to just be super flexible, you're yourself a working mom and so on, so that you never get into this discussion of, like, oh, did you do enough? Did you hear, but everyone is just like, writing down how they come in. As an alternative to just hiring somebody right away. Interesting. So if we talk a little bit more about like other functions, because I think this question was very much like focused on interior designers and do you do hourly or do you hire them? I mean, there's so many other external services, CAD drawings, bookkeeper, I'm sure, IT, like a lot of other things that you just need to do in order to run your business. How do you do that? Like, how do you probably stay flexible or like whatever the goal there is? Mark, how do you organize yourself there? Have you somebody hired? Is it external services? Like, how do you manage that?
Well, pretty much everything's internal except for, you mentioned CAD work. So sometimes when we're designing new products, we freelance a CAD person on furniture and lighting, et cetera, but pretty much everything's in-house. And we've structured our organization into like, 3 buckets. So or 4 buckets now. There's the creative team, then there's a marketing component with one person kind of focusing on a lot of the marketing, our newsletters, social media, photo shoots, et cetera. And then we have like the finance team, and then we have all the project managers. So everything is pretty much in-house. I mean, I think of our brand as not only an interior decorating firm, but I believe that we have a really strong storytelling approach to our work. And to me, the marketing and the bigger, broader story that we're, everything's kind of bubbling up to is super important. So I feel like it's stronger if it's in-house because you can be more organic, a little more fluid. So that's how we're structured.
And marketing is PR, is Instagram, is, marketing stories and so on. So this all includes it.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to even do more of our PR internally. Over the years, we built relationships with people that it's like we can manage it. I mean, we have a new book coming out in the fall, so there's a huge component to that. So the two people on the team that are kind of focusing on all those engagements, and we have a lot of goals from a marketing perspective, a lot of things we really want to do, and a lot of web-based things, which are, I think, really important to this day and age. So we're always focusing, I think, a lot of energy on the future. And I think I have a lot of ideas, so I don't really feel like it's a value to bring someone in from the outside to give me ideas. So I think for us, it just works internally.
Then how do you do that? And, if you have people hired for that, when was the moment where you switched from like thinking external is less attractive than hiring?
I think for us, the roles that we have sort of hired externally and kept externally have been PR. That's mostly because we use PR on kind of a seasonal basis. I feel like we kind of hit our stride, we kind of max out on a project sort of load that goes to press, and then it's kind of on me to recapture new work to then have a story to tell again. So we've outsourced that. We haven't brought that in-house. We have outsourced a lot of graphic design work, but I think that our company and the way that we've grown in offering graphic services to people, we have certainly rounded the corner pre-COVID on saying like we probably need a graphics person in-house to maintain the workload that we have. So we're kind of on the seesaw whether we keep that out of house with freelancers or bring it in-house. And I think bookkeeping for us, we fluctuated between starting from 2 to 10 to 20 people right before COVID. And we contracted since this sort of health crisis has happened. But I think bookkeeping is something that we likely will keep out of house unless we do something awesome like Mark and create a whole product line and there's like a whole different revenue stream that we need to account for. So hopefully I answered that for you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Maggie, how do you organize yourself? And then I think also there was a question from an anonymous attendee who asked, how do you do that with the 8 designers in your office? Just clarifying also, are they all part of your team or are they independent? Do you share an accountant? Like, how do you organize yourself on that?
They are under my umbrella here in the office, but we are all part of the MGD team. So we're using the same resources, the same vendors, the same workroom, our same installer. But because I think we are all kind of in a different stage of life for our pace and what is appropriate for our business structure now, I know that they know how much they want to work. So if they want to work full-time, they can. And then if they want to work part-time, that's fine too. So that's how we have structured it here. And that has a lot to do with us all being working moms. I've always been a big proponent of if you cut your own wood, it warms you twice. And so I feel like our girls are very efficient and everyone here in our office is always on the same page. We have meetings, twice a week. We're always texting. We're always talking about issues that we encounter and how to tackle those together and to sort of stay on brand as far as we are a business, but we also understand this is the business of home. So there's a lot of personal feelings tied to that. As far as our PR team, that is something that is out of house. Our bookkeeping is in-house, but our PR team is out in Colorado. We've never even met in person. So, that is something that we've outsourced. We also have our webmaster here in Gainesville, and she has her own company too. So that's something that is also out of house, but that's something that is a whole different realm of how my brain works and how to kind of tackle that. She keeps me up to date on how we need to make things more efficient, how to make them clearer, how to make it easier for our potential clients. Most of what we do is word of mouth. But, the way that the world is structured now, everyone is looking from their phone. So I find that having the PR team out of house and the webmaster out of house, they keep things very efficient for me. And I have the confidence that I don't have to worry about it.
Interesting. what, I got the question, what the tipping point is for adding admin staff. When do you start having someone in your office? Why don't we, like, how do you feel about that? Dan, you started nodding right away, so why don't I start with you?
No, because that's sort of a question I still have. We don't have like an executive administrative assistant or somebody that answers the phones. We have all kind of worn that hat, myself included, at lots of times in growing our business. But I imagine the answer, because I've interviewed people for this role and I've felt this before. The answer is when you are spending more time kind of organizing your day than participating in your day, feels like the time to sort of outsource that position. So yeah, we are very often there, but haven't pulled the trigger on that yet.
Maggie, Mark, do you have any opinions on that?
Well, I've always had a personal assistant, but right now I do not. She moved to Nashville, Tennessee. And we're probably not going to fill that position. My partner, Michael, I'm really lucky. He is involved in the business, and so he kind of runs kind of all the operations, the calendar, and all the traveling and the booking of everything like that. So it is one person kind of like overseeing that. So so in the calendar, so that's where we are right now. But I've had an assistant in the past, which is more of a personal assistant.
Maggie, do you have
doctor appointments now?
We just all start calling you. Maggie, do you have an admin staff? Like, when was for you the tipping point?
I had interns kind of come and go over the years. And then once my assistant came into my life, it was like I needed her way before she came. And I'm so grateful. She is full-time and more of the boots on the ground, and she's making things happen behind the scenes while, I'm doing the creative parts of MGD. It came after a long time of just knowing I needed the help and not devoting the time to finding the help. And so it was at the perfect time. We also, with our bookkeeping, that was something I realized how much time I was spending kind of just digging through all of that. And the same we have someone who does all of our ordering. And, when they turn in how much time they're spending on it, it is just so obvious how much I needed that. And I'm amazed that that's why I was, up too late at night, or, up in the morning, or, sitting at my desk or at my laptop in bed at night. I think that's when you kind of reach a tipping point for anyone who maybe is working on their own right now and is trying to decide, do I have an assistant? That is when you can divide and conquer, and you can do the things that you are hired to do and that you're good at. And then you can say, okay, go make sure that chair is at the upholsterer and he has the correct work order. Or, make sure that the workroom is on task for the install that's happening next week. And it takes that off of your plate and gives you the peace of mind that it's all still happening while you're doing, your job.
Mm-hmm. Super helpful. I got a question also in from Barbara Price, who says whether you're comfortable revealing your PR firms. I can say that for Schumacher. I can just start for Schumacher. We use we work with Elizabeth Blitzer and Company. She's also been in one of the prior webinars where we talked about how your home can be your calling card. I think that's a very interesting webinar for everyone to watch. And I think she also gives there a lot of, very helpful advice on how to use a PR agent. But I don't know whether Mark, Dan, Maggie, question, do you want to share your PR firm?
We use Elizabeth Blitzer too, actually. So we've been working with her on a monthly, always for the last 5 years, I think, 4 or 5 years. They've been very helpful, with any of our launches, collaboration launches, book tours, press here and there. But it's just great having not only their insight, but also the follow-up is really helpful. There's, getting pictures to people that they need, and, that kind of stuff. So we also use her. And it's also really helped because some of our collaborations, like with you guys and with Annie Selke, she represents both firms. So there's a lot of benefit to that in some ways, because it's, she's taking it from both angles, which is great.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
We use Allison Conklin, public relations out of Fort Worth, Colorado. And if you go on to my Instagram, I'll put their information up there. Their handle is it's at hello ACPR. So they are fantastic, and they have such creative vision on things that I'm not even thinking of, and I love that. And then our local kind of media group is Sawyer Media Group here in Gainesville, and that's at Sawyer Media Group on Instagram.
Thank you, Maggie.
Yeah, I guess I'm next, right?
You are. You don't have to.
No, we've actually through the years used 3 different agencies, and it's kind of fluxed with the way that our business has gone since we've done commercial and residential. Early on, we got a hotel project long ago that the people doing the press for the hotel were like, we'll just do your press too. And so we worked with a company called M18 for 3 years. Now we can't afford them because they do amazing press for all of these beautiful developers and hotels all over the world, but they were rad. In between, we worked with a group called M18 out of New York. There are 2 women who really have their hand on events and sort of new properties. And so we worked with them for about 6 months. And then most recently, we worked with McGraw Agency out of New York. And we worked with them for about 8 months, I think about a year ago. And they helped to sort of bring some definition around our residential business specifically, and really sort of make introductions to adjacent brands and partnerships and things like that. So we've used a bunch of people. And it sounds like I have to call Elizabeth Blitzer now. So great.
You do.
And I had that wrong. They're in Fort Collins, Colorado. I don't know what I was thinking. Sorry. Anyway, doesn't matter.
Thank you, Maggie. So, I have a couple of more questions, but before we go into the Q&A, I want to ask you all like my last question. And that is, what are your 3 tips on where one can really be smart, either save or splurge, where you feel like, okay, I feel really smart here. Dan, let's start with you again. You're nodding again, so I assume you have your answer right there.
I've been thinking of this. Number 1, get yourself a private banker. For me to have one person that I can pick up the phone at the bank and be like, hey, I need checks, or hey, this seems weird, or hey, like something is up with this account, that has been transformative to our business, and so easy. Very likely, once your business is to a certain amount of spend, a bank like Chase, who I think does great sort of small business partnerships, they have been great, and I have a private banker through them. So that's number 1. Number 2, on the save, technology is always expensive. And in my business, we have a lot of CAD licenses and Photoshop licenses and kind of all those creative suite things. We recently have gained Google as a client, and they forced us to use all their Google sort of technology. So Google Slides and Sheets and all of that. And it has been transformative to our business. Meaning it's cloud-based and multiple people can work on the same document at the same time. And if you have Gmail accounts, it's free. So when it comes to saving, some of the things that we were doing in InDesign, we now can do in Google Slides. And that has been both more efficient and more cost-effective for us. And number 3, I think on the splurge, I splurge on my office. Like it's not just your calling card. It also sets the tone, I think, for your work environment and making people that work, with you on your team feel valued. And so we have splurged on, making a rented space really look like our brand, but also when people walk in, they're like, wow, this is great. Like we would want to work here too. So that's my save, splurge, and your tip to get a private banker.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dan. Mark, what's your suggestion? What are your 3 tips?
Well, I guess where we splurge, I have a relationship with photographer Amy Nunsinger, who I met 10 years ago. She shot a project. She shot my house for House Beautiful, and ever since we shot that very first project, she's pretty much photographed everything for us. So we usually do photo shoots with every install, and then she's actually collaborating on a lot of marketing campaigns. So I guess that's a splurge and a luxury, to be able to spend kind of money like that. And I don't know if this even answers the question, but we are dead fast in the way we operate, and we operate around a calendar. We have a lot of processes and systems of like training tools that everyone has to follow. And then we have what we call NDS standards, which is our just company basics. So we always reiterate all those things all the time, so everyone's doing the same thing. I find that if everyone's functioning in the same, the same way with the same accountability, not only are you like, more profitable, but you're also more efficient.
Thank you, Mark. Maggie, what are your 3 tips?
I will reiterate what Dan said as far as making our office a place that everyone loves to be. I think that our office was a splurge, and it is, we make a big deal out of proposal day and inviting our clients here. So to have it already feeling like home. Now, we try to make sure that at least the areas that they see are very presentable, and then don't mind all the piled up boxes in the back. But that's having the candle lit and the music on and the snacks out and making a big deal of that day. That kind of is also coupled with, we try to be as paper free as possible. So that's a place we try to save. It's not always possible, but we try to do everything digitally. So we do all of our presentations are actually on a large television that we can mirror for our computer screen. So it's a smart TV, and we find we all have the app on our computer, so we can all just kind of flip between our computer screens. Most of our clients request digital copies anyway. There's very few that want the paper, so they can go home, they can look at it on their screens. They don't have to keep up with it. It's more or less in their inbox. So Google keeps our business very streamlined too. Google Docs, that's a living and breathing document that changes every single day. And again, 2 people can be working on those at once, or 3 or 4 if we're all logged in. Another thing that we do is we put everything on our Business Platinum American Express. And that is such a game changer when it comes to if our team has to travel, or if those are personal points that we're trying to use for hotels or travel accommodations or planes. And there's a million perks that come with that. So, and that's also another way to kind of see where you're spending. So, it divides it all automatically. It's very easy when you log into your account. So anyone who's just starting, I think that is an excellent piece of advice, because it kind of makes your money work for you. And it keeps things very organized. So, you kind of can keep track with things better. So definitely having our office space, but also saving on the paper cost and doing things digitally, and then go out, get yourself a credit card that works for you.
Thank you. Really good tips that I will apply to my personal life too. I have two questions here that are very similar, from Gary Hall and from Julissa Lopez, and they ask, if you were starting now, what investment would you do differently? Or one lesson learned in like where you spend you shouldn't have spent, or where you should have spent where you didn't spend. Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in. I agree with a statement that Mark said earlier. I think spending and getting a relationship with a good photographer early on is important for your business. I mean, you saw Maggie and Mark, both of them have spectacular photography, and that's not cheap. And I will tell you, it is that kind of commitment of dollars, though, that really catches the eye of editors. And the work is one thing, but documenting the work is really how we all build our businesses. So I think that's a place that I would say save your money or some of your profits from your project and make sure you document them, because that's a real, it takes money to make money investment in yourself.
Anything, Maggie, Mark, where you wish you didn't have spent the money on? Like a lesson learned there?
I felt that I kind of grew organically over time, and also listened to a lot of advice on kind of when it was appropriate to start those bigger chunks of spending. We kind of live in the age of social media, kind of runs through images, and we're all inundated with those. And while social media is free, the content is not. So the content is what will set you apart from someone else. So absolutely what Dan said is make sure that those projects shine through very good photos. You know, that is somewhere I think that at the end of a project, it's easy to cut a corner if you're just beginning. So make sure that it is followed through and that you have beautiful photos, because that's what will maybe get the next project for you.
Mm. Yeah, Benny, if you haven't done a webinar yet on photos and PR, that's a really good one. That should be coming out.
Okay, good. We did one on that. So for everyone, Dan, also you should watch it. So, but no, on a serious note, Amanda asked a question, said, okay, for someone starting out, what is the most important thing to spend on and the least important thing to spend on? So I think you guys already said, you know, spend on content. I think, you know, when you start, you know, it's the first thing you start, like, you know, having as your calling card. Can you think of anything else? Maybe the office, maybe you also said like start working from home if you start out, you know, why would you spend the money on that? I don't know what you guys think about it.
It's interesting. I feel like my answer now is that I would spend on an office, because that's been a way for me to attract talent and really express my sort of appreciation for my team and all the time that they spend there. But starting out, that's not where I spent. I mean, and I talked about that earlier, like build in as much flexibility as yourself as you can, because it's really about runway, right? If it takes a lot of money to start these businesses, and a lot of you're jumping into the unknown. So as much flexibility as you can give yourself on office space. Listen, you're a designer, right? You are creative. You are scrappy at the beginning, especially. So you don't have to spend a lot of money to make it look like $1 million either. We all know my background is proof. A coat of white paint goes a long way. So I feel like, you know, when it comes to your entry office space, be creative, make it look great, but that's not the space that I would spend on first. I'm with Maggie, light the candle still, right? Get the $35 or $65 or $105 candle, because it always can smell great, but don't spend on your rent there.
Any other advice?
Well, I think it's also finding that secret number of like how many people to have on the team. So we have in the past been kind of overstaffed in some ways. I think right now the amount of people that we have is more efficient. So I say sometimes more is not more. And, you know, we recently expanded our offices, and we just separated the design studio from the project managing business office. They're connected, but they're separate spaces. And the whole creative studio has been life-changing. I mean, something that we love being here, working in. All the walls can be pinned up on, so we can have multiple projects going on, which you can see there all over.
Wow.
The room. So there's probably 6 projects up on the wall in different spaces. We really spent a lot on building out a lot of cabinetry. I don't really like to see, you know, tons of clutter. So pretty much all of our catalogs, our fabrics are behind doors. But we love having the walls open to be able to see things. So we didn't have that luxury, you know, 3 years ago. So it has been life-changing in many ways. So, you know, that works for us. But I also think not having a streamlined team is also more efficient in many ways.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, it's 5 o'clock. The hour is over already. And I'm really sad. I wish this could go on forever, especially with those 3 wonderful panelists. Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you very much, Maggie. Thank you very much, Mark. This was really a pleasure. And for everyone who is listening, again, you can watch the 3 of us again, or past webinars on YouTube, where you can, you know, search for us, or you go through Instagram. So this was great stuff. Thank you very, very much. And you know, I'm planning on a big martini party with all the panelists once we are allowed to meet each other again, see each other again.
Yes.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Take care.